Welcome and greetings, companies, exporters, trade and business experts in the aviation aeronautics sector. Welcome to today's webinar on behalf of PBExpo and PartSpace. We're delighted that you could attend and join us. These are challenging times. We all have to find some innovative solutions, and I think we can agree that PBExpo is right on that. First of all, my name, quick introductions. My name is Susanna Hardy, and I'm Chief Content Officer for IBT Online. I'm going to be curating questions and hosting the webinar and leaving the talking though to Adrian and Samantha, the two experts that we have today. So most of you already know PartSpace and PBExpo, but just quickly, resuming, PartSpace is a technology company in the aviation sector. As you all know, they've been around for over 25 years. They provide solutions for the avionics industry, for the supply chain in particular, and have a vast and robust experience doing that. PBExpo is their trade show in a sense. That's this will be its third year, so we're excited about that. And as I said, taking some innovative solutions to make sure that things still happen. It is a trade show that is totally dedicated to the aviation sector, spare parts, allowing spare parts MROs and companies to meet and discuss and interact with technology companies and business solution providers. So without further ado, we're going to now introduce also the individuals. We're joined today by Adrian Viller, who is the Director of International Business Development. Adrian is a well and trusted member of the senior management of PartSpace. He is a key developer for PBExpo. He's worked across 6 continents, always in the supply chain and aviation supply chain. And his expertise, obviously, I think many of you will already know and have benefited from his expertise in providing tailor-made solutions for your sector. And Samantha Sofici is the Business Development Manager for IBT Online, based also in Florida. And she really is an expert in the online world and finding online business development tools to help companies grow. So there you go. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over the mic to Adrian and Samantha to look at the agenda today. The agenda in 5 different parts, starting with statement of the industry, business development, effective online business development, action points, and a Q&A. I would remind you, please, to drop any questions you have in the chat box, and I will be curating the questions. There's a live Q&A at the end. We would really like you to put in your questions. We will get back to you about all of that. So without further ado, Adrian, if you'd like to start, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susanna, for having me this morning. It is a true joy to be here. And, these are very challenging times, as you said. And I think that in having a dialogue and really engaging with each other, we're going to be able to find a path through these hard times and ultimately come out stronger, leaner, and ready for the economy that will become after the initial stages of the COVID-19 crises lapse. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of a state of the industry, a little bit of an overview of what's going on in the aviation market today. This might be probably the harshest part of the presentation. I'm not going to sugarcoat a lot of things. This is the reality is that this is a global issue with global impact. But as such, the solutions also need to be global. And we'll talk about some recommendations and solutions towards the end of the presentation, along with Samantha, and some thoughts that we have about what companies in the aviation spare parts supply chain and the MRO business can do to leverage their strengths in this particular and extremely challenging time to keep the doors open, to keep revenue flowing, to keep cash flowing, and to come out, as mentioned earlier, leaner, stronger, at the end of this crisis period. So what we're seeing today, on a global level, is a huge reduction in both, particularly in passenger capacity worldwide. Domestic airlines here in the United States, United, Delta, American, JetBlue, Southwest, just about all of them have announced reductions to capacity in the order of 40 to 50%, 50% being about the average in reduction of passenger capacity here in the United States, up to 100% in some cases for their international routes. As countries around the world have closer borders and closer airspace, say for just humanitarian flights or repatriation flights, there is not a lot of places where you can fly to these days, and that's led to a huge reduction in international capacity for long haul flights and wide body aircraft. To name a couple of examples, particular examples overseas, AIG Group, which is British Airways, Iberia, Vueling, and Aer Lingus, they've cut their capacity 75% approximately. That's as of the 9th of March. These numbers may be even higher at this time. Air France Group, which includes KLM, have cut their capacity almost 90%. Austrian airline part of the Lufthansa group in particular, including Lufthansa, Austrian, Swiss Airlines, they've cut their capacity in some cases entirely, in some divisions like Austrian, in other cases 90-95%. And other airlines, Alitalia, Copa, Etihad, Avianca, as of this morning, have totally suspended operations for a period of, in some cases, a couple of weeks, in some cases, 30 days, in some cases, indefinitely, until things start, let's just say, leveling in the market. And the initial effect of that, especially in our industry, is that in particular airlines are going to be temporarily or perhaps definitively laying off some redundant staff. They're going down just to critical personnel to keep critical operations open. Some positions will be eliminated as companies seek to achieve efficiencies and reduce costs. And unfortunately, some companies that were ill prepared for a crisis of this magnitude will be forced to close their doors. So, we do have some figures from IATA, which is, the International Aviation Travel Association, and they have some, on the next slide, they have some numbers that have actually been updated as of yesterday. So I'm going to share this information is as of March 5th, they were estimating a $113 billion cost to the industry as a result of COVID-19 and the reduction in passenger capacity. And here you see some initial figures of what those reductions in passenger capacity look like, anywhere between 9 and 25%. Unfortunately, that was revised 2 days ago, and the new figure is about $252 billion impact, loss of revenue in terms of the cut of in passenger capacity available throughout the system. And that's a result, again, of a lot of airlines in the last couple of days choosing to cut operations significantly or altogether. So, this is a very drastic cut in capacity. It's basically unprecedented. If we look at, the most recent event that we can all probably recall of such a scenario is probably the aftermath of the September 11th attacks in the United States and in Virginia. And that only led to a 27% capacity reduction in globally, and in the initial days, or in the initial weeks rather, about a 40% reduction of capacity domestically. So, this is definitely a much more severe and much more pronounced crises in the short term. But, if we go to the next stage, to the next slide, sorry. One of the things that we need to keep in mind is that COVID-19 was definitely the catalyst, but it's not the origin of the industry crisis. There was a lot of capital that was freely flowing into the industry for a while, and that kept a lot of businesses that didn't have sound business plans in place, that didn't have their finances in order. It kept them afloat, just the availability of easy credit and free flowing money that was available up until a few weeks ago. That was what was keeping a lot of businesses open. But we know that this is true because just in the last 2 years, between 2018 and 2019, almost 45 airlines worldwide went bankrupt. And some of the most famous cases, of course, Thomas Cook Airways over the summer last year, Jet Airways in India, Avianca closing its Brazil and Argentina subsidiaries almost simultaneously, Air Berlin at the beginning of 2018, Fly BMI. So these were just, sort of the canaries in the coal mine announcing that there was already a crisis on the way, which was definitely brought upon in a much more drastic way than anybody could have imagined due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that is the initial impact. The situation at this particular stage is pretty grim in terms of the next couple of weeks and what the next couple of months could look like. However, I don't want to be here the bearer of terrible news throughout. There are a couple of highlights that will probably be some of the channels that a lot of companies that are moving quickly to adjust to this new reality will be able to pursue. Some of those good news is that charter operations, and in particular business aviation, is seeing a growth in the number of bookings. We don't really have numbers yet from the NBAA to report, but we do have some early information, early data from the charter operations operators themselves, telling us that bookings are up anywhere between 20 and 30%. A lot of wealthy passengers are choosing to fly private at this time. There's also been an increase in repatriation flights, medevac flights. So there is some good news in terms of business aviation operations, at least here in the United States. In other markets, the situation is a little bit different. I've had the opportunity in the last couple of days to speak with a lot of our members, a lot of the 7,600 member companies that are active on PartSpace, and speak to them about what's going on in their industry, in their market, in their vertical. And, that's led to a couple of interesting discoveries over the past 10 or so days. One of those discoveries being that, for example, in Europe, this is not the case. Actually, business aviation is also very much down. However, in other markets, such as the Southeast Asian market, business aviation has seen an increase in operations, and repatriation flights, in particular medevac flights for companies in those verticals, have proven to be an early source of revenue in the middle of this crisis. So in the midterm, let's talk about what happens in the next couple of months in our industry. Realistically, even though MROs at the moment, the ones that I've spoken to, are still reporting a backlog in orders, they're still working, they still have enough work in the shop for the next 30, 60 days. Realistically, in the next couple of months, some of those orders might cancel, some of those orders are not going to be followed up on. They're not going to get replacement orders to increase their backlog. So there is going to be some negative impact to MROs, especially if they don't look outside their existing client pool for more business. And that, of course, will also affect the spare part suppliers. This is one of the reasons why the ASA has, the Aerospace Suppliers Association has petitioned the Trump administration directly for aid to spare part suppliers, because we know that the impact is coming. It's probably not here in the initial stages of the crisis, because orders are still coming from airlines that have chosen to put their airplanes into maintenance at this stage, and MROs that still have maintenance backlogs. But as those orders dry up and they get completed and delivered back to customers, we do see that there might be a negative impact, a significantly negative impact for spare part suppliers, again, provided that they don't diversify their customer base, all things the same. And this is just due to the fact that there are fewer flights. Fewer flights means fewer cycles and fewer flight hours, less maintenance required for planes. And so, we get into a little bit of a vicious cycle in terms of demand for repair services and spare parts. Cargo, on the other hand, you may have seen some news articles recently that, UPS, DHL, FedEx, are all working, and some of the other cargo carriers out there are all working very, very hard, uh, practically at capacity, to move merchandise, to move a lot of material that is needed in certain critical areas for PPE and for medical supplies in hard hit areas with the COVID-19. So there's a lot of work that those companies are experiencing at the moment. So cargo capacity, even though initially, because of the disruptions to the supply chain in China, they had some initial drops in bookings. That has since been completely reverted, and as a matter of fact, they're increasing capacity in many cases. And we have seen even commercial carriers like American Airlines, Lufthansa, and Avianca specifically, that I know of, continue operating mostly as cargo only, given the fact that it is neither safe nor feasible at this moment economically to transport passengers. So a lot of airlines are looking at cargo as a way to offset some of their losses in revenue from passenger capacity. And the better news is actually coming out of Asia at the moment. I've had an opportunity to talk in most recent days with companies in Singapore and in China, and they're coming back online slowly. People have, been outside of their workplaces in some markets for 30, 45 days, and that, of course, has slowed down business that side of the world. But now, now that they have successfully flattened the infection curve on their end, and they're seeing fewer and fewer cases of COVID-19, people are slowly coming back to work. Factories are coming back online. The supply chain is normalizing. And that is leading to fast increases in both passenger and cargo capacity and demand for MRO services and parts. So as we're just starting to see the short-term effects of COVID-19, which it's fair to say that we're about 6 to 8 weeks delayed in terms of what China and Asia experienced at the time. They're slowly starting to come back online. And that ultimately is good news, because for us, what that means is that in maybe 6 to 8 weeks time, we will see things starting to shape up again, demand to tick up again, and to for things to stabilize and hopefully even improve. So going on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about the long-term trend. And here's where the best news is. And I really, want to end of sort of this dire state of the industry presentation on a positive note. And that is that the long-term demand for passenger cargo capacity, MRO services, and spare parts is all extremely positive. This is a crisis that was caused those precipitated by the COVID-19. It was caused by an excess of liquidity in the industry that led to some bad businesses staying afloat, and we're just starting to see the correction in the market. But overall, the trend in the long term, by long term, I'm talking a year plus, is extremely, extremely positive. IATA estimates that if we go to the next slide, actually, that the trend in terms of passenger traffic will exceed GDP over the next 20 years in just about every market around the world. And especially in emerging markets like the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, it's almost double the growth of GDP. That is extremely good news for anybody who is in the supply chain, um, because in aviation spare parts supply chain and MRO services, this is an overwhelmingly good news, and a very good long-term trend to keep focused on. Even though the storm, we're kind of in the middle of the storm, we're just entering the storm, depending on what perspective you want to see it from. Beyond the storm is a very, very good market that will only continue to grow in the next couple of years. The other good news is that governments around the world have announced that they are stepping in to keep this critical industry afloat by a variety of different means necessary. In Italy, for example, announced that they are essentially taking over Alitalia again and nationalizing the airline. Canada and announced that they were going to support Air Canada. In the European Union, the ECB has announced that they have funds to support a lot of the different airlines through this rough time. And in the United States, in yesterday's $2 trillion package that was approved by the Senate, that does include significant monies available for large airlines that they will be able to tap into in order to avoid layoffs, in order to avoid shutting their doors, and in order to keep flying and keep this industry going strong. So that is all extremely good news. And this will also lead to a reset in the industry. I think that reality check, we did have a lot of operators, a lot of companies out there that were over leveraged financially. They did not have solid business plans in place, and this will lead to a good reset in the industry, and will leave the good players in place, those companies that are well prepared to do business, and risk capital will return to the industry as it will to all the other industries, and we'll be able to see entrepreneurs that have solid business plans be able to continue growing. And in the short term, just keep in mind, going to what happened back in 2001 with the September 11th attacks. That led to the single longest period of growth for our industry. It was 15 plus years of economic growth for our industry. It led to the emergence of leaner operators. The LCCs and the ULCCs all emerged from that crisis. And it also led to better business practices. And I think that what will come out of this is exactly the same. We're going to go back to a period of stable and continuous growth, where we will see better operators and better business practice take hold in our industry. In the short term, the other trend that we see is that the market will become more competitive. As the MRO backlog decreases, and that's going to increase competition for MRO and overhaul services. And overall, it will lead to lower maintenance costs for operators, which is also a positive and much welcome news to operators, where maintenance has always been one of the biggest cost centers. So with that in mind, we do have some recommendations for any companies that are feeling, and any business leaders that at the time are feeling insecure about what to do and what next steps to take. One of the first things that I would recommend is that you invest in diversifying your customer base. As mentioned earlier, this is a global crisis with global effects, but also global solutions. This is not the time for isolation. This is not the time to look inwards. It is quite the moment to look outward and see where else can we create business opportunities for ourselves. Not every market has been or will be as severely affected by COVID-19 as China, Western Europe, and the United States. There are markets that have taken early measures to prevent the situation from getting out of hand in their particular markets. And ultimately, those are going to be places that are going to stabilize first, that are going to come back online first, and where opportunities will arise for companies that are peeking into those markets. PartSpace is strategically positioned to help companies that are wanting to do this. We have a global marketplace for aircraft parts and repair services. And we do believe, especially in the days of social distancing, where, and I personally am a big advocate of, shaking hands and sitting down and doing business. But in the days of social distancing, understand that e-commerce can be an extremely powerful tool to increase your branding, especially in new market, to get in front of your customers, to engage with them. And I'll talk a little bit about engagement in a second, and to really ensure that you are well positioned for the recovery in the industry. And it gives you a strategic advantage above other competitors in this field. The other thing that you want to do is look at your cost centers. Look at your cost centers and understand where the opportunities are to get more productivity from existing resources. And by cost centers, look at, any sort of uh, subscriptions that you have. Look at any sort of staffing that you have, and look and see what additional productivity can you gain from those existing resources without sacrificing your revenue. And here's where the challenge comes in. How do you downsize? How do you cut down costs? How do you become more lean and more efficient without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as it were? So how do you do that? Well, the way that you do that is understand which of those resources are generating revenue for your business, and optimize those resources, provide resources with additional value and with additional tools that can help them maximize the benefit that they provide for your business. To make sure that when you look at your cost centers, you're not shooting yourself in the foot by killing off revenue. The other thing that's truly important, and this is something that I actually read online this morning, which I think is very, very important, is that every person in your business is now a customer success agent. Engagement with the customer and retention of customers, and additional opportunities with existing customers is going to be one of the main ways in which you are able to sustain your business at this time. You don't want to sacrifice customers that are currently perhaps on the verge of not doing business with you. You want to make sure that you keep your existing customers as satisfied as possible, as engaged as possible, in order to retain that revenue in the midterm and in the long term. And finally, don't panic. Look at the data, look at your business data, look at your costs, look at your revenue, look at your bottom line, and really identify where are the opportunities for growth. Look at trends in the industry. Don't just read the bad news. Go find information that will help you make better business decisions based on opportunities that are available in the market right now. And finally, be adaptable, and be flexible. Those businesses that are adaptable and flexible in fluid situations like the current COVID-19 crisis, where there are extremely unpredictable outcomes, those will be the businesses that survive and thrive. And I want to finish off by just saying that PartSpace and IBT were heavily invested in the success of our customers, and we're heavily invested in making sure that they survive this period of crisis, and that post period of crisis they're able to grow significantly with the recovery that will take place in our industry. And with that, I'll pass it on to Samantha, and thank you, Susanna, for the opportunity to talk today.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Before we get on to Samantha, I'd love to have a quick poll. So I'm going to launch this poll, and I would love you all to grab your mice, and just click on the response that best fits you. how has COVID-19 affected your business at the moment? Are you all remote working? Are you looking to online solutions? Have you halted international business? Most of you have replied so far. I'm going to give you some quick, pretty well all of you are remote working. It's interesting, many of you are looking for online solutions. Some of you are putting international business on hold, but the majority are keeping international business as well, which is very interesting as well. So keeping flexible, and some of the recommendations that Adrian has put out. Right, I'm going to close the poll. Thank you very much for responding to that. Close the poll, and now we're going to be talking about business development tools with social distancing. Samantha.
Thank you, Susanna. So before I dive into the subject, just a real quick introduction for those of you who don't know IBT Online. We're a private company. We've been in business since 2002. And our main goal is to help exporters in their international markets through their online presence, which has never been more relevant. For us, that means through website localization and international online marketing. We've worked with over 450 companies. We've delivered over 1,500 online global programs in 25 plus languages and 50 plus countries. So we are very well versed in the online space. So now diving into the COVID-19 crisis. So we know that unfortunately COVID is a global pandemic, but it's clearly not only a health issue, but also an economic and societal one as well. So for businesses, COVID is all pervasive. It affects all aspects of your business and everyone's business worldwide, as we've heard with the numbers with Adrian. So, excuse me. So all decisions at the moment have to be taken with COVID in mind. And the route out of this for businesses will definitely depend on each company's circumstances. In this time of social distancing, online is clearly an essential key that now has to be adopted, integrated, and incorporated into all aspects of everyday life, as we saw with the poll, with the majority of you guys working from home. So even just looking at the reason why we're gathered here today, we're here because the trade show we were really looking forward to, PBExpo, has been postponed. So although we have to practice social distancing for some time, Partspace and Adrian understood that there's an online format that we can work to help people keep engaged and informed and excited about the industry, and sharing best practices and how we can all move forward into hopefully a very prosperous age in the near future. So talking to companies all over the world, we've identified 4 main issues that we see affecting business. So we'll take a look at them now. The business priorities that we've heard is first looking after employees, really trying to lay off the least amount of people as possible, really trying to take care of them. The second one is managing costs, as Adrian pointed out in the previous slides, trying to keep the costs low while keeping the revenue as high as possible. The third is maintaining supply chains and existing partnerships, and thankfully we have Partspace here to help us do that. And the fourth is generating sales, exports, and business. So this is what we're hearing again and again from companies, and this is going to be the main focus in the following slides, especially taking a look at your online presence. So looking at the world is online. In a time where we're social distancing, it's really great news that as of January 2020, more than 4.5 billion people across the globe are on the internet. That's about 60% of the world's population, and from last year to this year, about 300 million new users plugged in. This is great news for us because that means all of these people are at our fingertips. These are the people that we can reach through having a very smart, very localized online presence. So when we number of people online and their behavior, I want to draw your attention to the last number on the right, which is the average time spent, almost 7 hours a day. That's the average. And We've been trying to find stats as to how many hours are spent since this COVID outbreak, which I imagine is a lot more. And they're hard to find, but there is indication that the average is topping at about 8.5 hours a day. So if there's one takeaway from this slide, is that across the globe, your customers, your prospects, your leads, your future distributors, your future employees, suppliers, partners, everyone your business interacts with is online, and they're spending most of their day online. And not only are they online, but they are also communicating. Again, because of COVID, it has had a massive impact on this, because people aren't shaking hands, going to meetings, having lunch. A lot of people are communicating via internet. So remote working is affecting the way people and businesses are communicating with each other, both with their employees and their prospects. So now we're going to take a quick look at some tools that we can use in this online space to help companies in this time of social distancing really reach out to your international audiences and also domestic. So taking a look at the core online tools, we tend to divide the online tools into two interrelated sets, the first being your website and the second being online marketing. There was a time where it was okay to have just a basic core domestic website back in the good old internet days about a few years ago, where it was enough to have a decent website and have your web guy optimize it every now and then, maybe once a quarter or once or twice a year, kind of like a spring cleaning for search engine purposes. And it was enough to publish a blog a year to get ranked on the first page. But now that everybody and their mother has a website, things are a lot more competitive. So it's still good to have a core website, but you need to do SEO. So and SEO has to be checked regularly and regularly freshened up as well. So a blog a year no longer cuts it. You need to have regular online marketing with both social media marketing and search engine optimization. You need outreach campaigns to make sure that you actually get found, understood, and that you're easier to do business with. This applies both to the US market and internationally as well. So looking into the next slide, the reason for this change is because before it wasn't customer centric. It was the company that was controlling the message outwards to its customers. Now everything online is searcher centric or customer centric. So your company might be producing the best widgets in the world or the best parts, but if you're not communicating that correctly to the search engines, you won't be found. You'll be nearly invisible. So for all things online, you always have to put your customer in the center. Put yourself in the place of your prospective buyer. This is essentially what we mean by a localized presence, whether that's for your website or for your marketing or for your e-commerce. Anything online is customer and searcher centric. So the best way to illustrate that is how search engines are actually working right now. So we're going to take a quick look at Google as being the lead search engine. So if you have a website for your company and you want to reach some prospects, say in an international market, you might think, and this is what we hear a lot, why don't I just put a few foreign language pages on my website, and Google will probably recognize that and it'll do its job. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And the same thing goes for Google Translate. Google Translate does not help your search engine ranking in outside countries. So search engines, and here we're taking a look at Google, but this also applies to Yandex, Bing, Baidu, and even YouTube, Amazon, and Facebook. YouTube is actually the second largest search engine in the world, which is kind of crazy. Because all of these platforms, they act like search engines. They are searcher-centric. So there are 192 country-specific and region-specific search engines. And let's say you're targeting the German market. Well, the person in Germany who's searching for your product, whether they are searching for a part for their business or searching as a customer buying for themselves, they are very likely to use google.de, DE being for the German market. they're also very likely to search in their own native language. So they're going to be searching in German. So unless your website is in German, localized for the German market, it's very unlikely that they find you unless they know your brand name. And here's a practical example of this. So Susanna, who you've heard from, who is sitting in the UK in London, and myself, we both searched for red shoes on our prospective search engines. So I searched in google.com and she searched on google.co.uk. And logically, we came up with results that were completely relevant for us. So I got stores that I'm very familiar with, like Macy's and Zappos, and she got stores I've never heard of, but are very familiar to her, like Debenhams and House of Fraser. And it totally makes sense to us in a consumer goods sort of fashion, but you have to keep in mind that it works the same way for B2B as well. So moving on to the next slide, not only are they specific to the location, but you also have to keep in mind that you have to use the appropriate keywords. So even if you're using the same language, you can get different results depending on what words you use. So in this example, if you look at tren versus comboio, and I'm sorry, Adrian, if I said those incorrectly, in Brazil, if you use the word tren, you will get 95% of people who searched for the word train use tren. However, on the other side, if you use tren and you're trying to reach the Portuguese market, only 2% of the people in Portugal that are searching for that term, that are searching for train, use tren. Instead, they use comboio. So it's so important to do your keyword research, not only for your international markets, but also for the US, to make sure that you are using competitive keywords in your content. So your blogs, your videos, your About Us section, and also your social media marketing. So all the posts that you're putting out, your YouTube, it's really important to have the proper keywords for your buyer persona, for who you are trying to reach out to. That brings me to localization. So with search engines and social media being customer centric, you really need to consider having a localized presence to grow globally. And here's a list of a few best practices when localizing your online presence. It's really important to keep everything from local domain names and regulatory requirements to making sure it's culturally appropriate and adapted to the local language. So having this localized presence in both your website and your social media will help you be found, be understood, easier to do business with in this time that so many people are online and searching for solutions. So another piece of website localization, and Adrian mentioned this before, is e-commerce. So first we're going to take a look at B2C, global e-commerce, but for my people out there who are B2B, don't lose interest just yet. Because e-commerce is, we just want to get a sense of how big it is. So out of the total world's population of 7.5 billion, 4.5 billion people are online and 3.4 billion people are shopping online. This means 45% of the world's population are buying things online. This is huge. And it's truly global and it's growing really, really quickly. So even in such a mature market like the United States, it's grown 14.6% year over year. And that's nothing compared to China or even cross-border e-commerce. So for example, from the US to Canada or vice versa, that's growing exponentially at 18.6 per year, year over year as well. So we're still trying to get data on the effects of e-commerce since COVID-19, but we've seen a few data points, and it's an agreement that it has skyrocketed for most of the sectors, especially for online groceries and big generalists like Amazon, which actually already accounts for about $4 out of every $10 of e-commerce, which is insane. It continues to gain market share, and it actually recently announced that they're hiring 100,000 new staff. So e-commerce is definitely growing. And it's important to keep in mind that B2B e-commerce is growing as well. So many people think of e-commerce as just selling to individual consumers sitting in their home office or the kitchen table, and they're surprised to look at the prevalence of e-commerce for B2B transactions. although it's really challenging to get consistent data, but by all measurements, the number is huge. At the end of 2018, Statista estimated that global B2B e-commerce to be valued at around 10.6 trillion in 2019. That's about 3.5 times the size of the B2C market, which is insane. So what we have to remember that even though it is B2B, so business to business, we're still talking to people on the other side of that business. People who like to shop for their businesses the same way that they shop for themselves. So as you can see, like 94% of B2B purchases are researched online before contacting a sales rep. That's a solid 3/4 of the B2B buyers do more than half of their purchases online. So we need to have an online presence that even if you're selling B2B, we want it to be very relevant, very helpful. We want to have helpful content. We want to be trusted in those markets. So even if your B2B product or service has a high price point and is customized, you should take a consultative sales approach. Make sure your website is compelling enough to encourage a call to action and convince your customer to request a contact, because he's already doing his online research. He's already looking at your competitors and comparing your services. So you want to make sure that your online presence, both B2C and B2B e-commerce, is thorough, is compelling, and is relevant. So there's a few choices for e-commerce, and these options are generalist marketplaces, so things like Amazon or eBay or Mercado Libre if you're going into Latin America. There's also specialist marketplaces and in-market distributors, so their specific sites, like Lowe's, for example, which is specific to construction. The next one is your own e-commerce platform, so selling directly from your website, and you can choose from a bunch of different e-commerce platforms like WooCommerce or BigCommerce. And then the fourth one is a combination of the marketplace of your own. So unfortunately, I don't have time to dive deeper into these 4 options, but just so you guys know, we will have a webinar on April 8th about this subject specifically, so e-commerce strategies during a COVID-19 disruption. So feel free to join us there. So then next, we want to look at the COVID-19 impact regarding your online presence. So everything that we've reviewed from when I started speaking until now has been that first half of the semicircle, your online presence. So your website, your localized website, and your e-commerce presence. But what we want to know is, and what we want to really think about, is how COVID-19 has impacted your buyer interacting with your website. So what we want you guys to take a look at, and these are a few questions to ask yourself. Does your buyer persona change? So the person or the business that you're trying to sell to, has their goals changed? Are they interacting with you in a different way? Are they not purchasing, but they're looking for thought leaders? These are things to think about. How are they interacting with your business? So how has that buyer's journey changed? Something that Adrienne said that I thought was absolutely on point, that right now in the buyer's journey, it's really important to really focus on that delight stage, to keep your customers that you currently have really, really happy, so that when this crisis is near its end, they can refer you to other customers. That was a really great way of thinking about the buyer's journey. But what's really, really interesting during this whole thing is we've taken a look at a few numbers, and 87% of marketers in North America predict an increase in the use of online services by customers during this outbreak. 75% also predict an increase in e-commerce usage, as do 70% of the UK marketers. So your customers are still out there, they're interacting. You just need to figure out how you can provide the best service to them. So now we're going to jump into the online marketing piece. So that second half of the semicircle. You always need to have, so regardless of what your objectives are, you need to have a great website. That's a great place to start. Your website acts like a springboard for all of your marketing activities. So you have to make sure that you have a really good solid base before you start marketing your website. And for exporters, as we spoke about, that means having a localized website for your top markets. And the key to this website that works hard to get you more leads and business is a website that is looked after. So as we talked about, we want to keep it fresh. We want to keep it updated. We want to keep it animated. We want to make sure that you're providing relevant content at the right time for the right market. So now we're going to take a look at the social media piece. So the world's map of social networks, there are 3.5 billion people using social networks across the world. That is huge. These are all people that you can be communicating with. It's just a really great way for companies to improve their international market presence and reach potential clients all over the world without having to jump on a plane. And this is especially important in times of social distancing as we are right now. We've taken a look at a few numbers, and Mark Zuckerberg actually reported that WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger usage has more than doubled since the start of this crisis. So people are really looking for that one-on-one connection with each other and with the businesses that they're interacting with. Other 2 or 3 platforms just to mention, Reddit reported an increase of 20 to 50% in subreddits related to business, finance, news, education, travel, sports. So that's something to keep in mind for your business, because people are still interested in those subjects. And a few other numbers, there's been a 22% increase in Instagram campaign impressions as found by one of the influencer agencies, and a 27% jump in engagement on average TikTok engagements as well. So people are on social media, they want to hear from you, they want to interact. And that leads me to this next slide. So before you even get started with social media and outreaching to these people who are just thirsting for interaction, you want to make sure that your buyer persona is identified. So real quick, what I mean by that is a buyer persona is kind of like a fictitious ideal person that you are selling to. What does that look like? And you could have multiple for your verticals and for your international markets. The more specific, the better. So their age, what they do, what they like, what they buy, what stage of the life are they at. These are all things to take a look at for your buyer persona. And what this does is it just really focuses in on who you're marketing to and what they would like. The next piece is the buyer's journey. You want to make sure that the buyer's journey is mapped and that you have content for where these specific buyers are in this journey of purchasing your product or your service. You also want to make sure that you have your objectives set, which I will talk about in a second, and your campaign mapped. So you don't want to just be posting just to post. You actually have a plan. So regarding objectives, so different objectives have different goals. Depending on, so when designing your market strategy, it's really important to always be aligned with your overall business strategy. And this will give you a starting point to decide what you want to achieve and consequently how you're going to monitor this or what metrics you should really focus on. So if we take social media here as an example, you can see how within a singular platform, for example, Facebook, you can already tailor your activities to the goals and overall objectives of your business. So depending on what you're selling or what service you're providing, it might be a time to switch business objectives to fit with what your buyer persona needs right now. So maybe, as we talked about, maybe you want to improve, sorry, Susanna, do you mind going back one? Maybe you want to improve, thank you, customer retention. So you want to take a look at your testimonials, your social media sentiments. You want, or maybe you're looking at trying to grow the brand right now. People aren't actually purchasing your product, but that doesn't mean you can't grow the brand and try to increase awareness in these social media networks. So that means kind of looking at followers and shares and that sort of thing. So depending on your business objective, there are different goals and metrics to follow. So the COVID-19 marketing, we want to focus on the bottom of the funnel. So direct sales and lead generation. That's what we're suggesting, just because if you can gain any revenue from this, that's what you would want to focus on in your marketing. But we always suggest that you take a look at your priority markets and your priority verticals. Maybe different markets are in different places in the buyer's journey, so take a look at that, as I mentioned before. And you want to take a look at innovative solutions. So as we're doing right now, we weren't able to go to the PBExpo yet, but we PartSpace said, let's do a webinar. Let's try to get information out. Let's try to help these companies. That was an innovative solution, and that's something that you can do for your customers as well. Maybe or maybe throw out some tutorial videos and put them on YouTube. Anything to help people in this time. You want to be in a space of helping people get through this. Sorry. The perils of working from home. Give me a second. So next, let's look at action points, helpful sources, and takeaways. So for your websites, we want you guys to focus on saying we are open for business, even though we're going through this tough times. You want to tell your customers and your prospects how you are doing business with them, and how they can interact with you. We've had a few companies put up on their homepage kind of like a message saying this is how we're dealing with COVID-19. This is what we're doing. This is what we can do for you. So try to make sure that your website is relevant to your customers. So if there's any new calls to action that you can add to your website, maybe there's a section in your website that you can add to help your distributors or your in-market partners. Maybe it's a time to consider e-commerce, especially since so many people are online and purchasing stuff. So make sure to really take a look at your website, a critical view of your website, and see how it can work for you in this time. And for your marketing, you want to focus on inbound. So the more content that you can put out that is timely, that is relevant, the more people that will be able to find you and be able to go onto your website. So you want to make sure that you're still on their radar. You want to make sure that you're still relevant. So maybe take this time to take a look at your keywords, how you're doing on search engines, and make sure to stay up to date on that, because once it's gone, it's gone. It's really, really hard to get back up on that first page of Google once you're booted off. So a few helpful resources in this time. In addition to IBT Online, we got you guys covered in terms of your online presence, talking to your international customers, outreaching to them, and we have a few webinars coming up, one about e-commerce and another one about online marketing. But in addition to that, as well as obviously PartSpace, take a look at your local economic development agency. They might have some information and some helpful resources during this time. What their main objective is to help businesses in their states. So that's a really good place to start. And if you're not sure who your local economic development agency is, if you take a look at that link at the bottom, the cytoamerica.org/state trade directory, that will give you all the information that you need. Cyto, SBA, Exim Bank, these are all really, really great resources. And if you need any help getting in touch with anybody there, don't hesitate to reach out to me and we would be happy to help. And lastly, please look after yourself, look after your loved ones, look after your communities. Obviously this is a difficult time and we need to take care of ourselves and our loved ones first. So stay safe out there, and thank you so much for attending. now answer
Samantha
Q&A.
and Adrian, thank you very much indeed. We have a few questions, so I'm going to jump right into those. Just while we're getting the final questions up, and there's a couple of just coming in now, I'm going to launch a quick 2-second, 10-second poll. What online tools does your company use, or are you thinking about using soon? If you could please just, grab your mouse and just say which ones you find. If you're involved in e-commerce or direct marketing, localized websites, there's a real split on it, actually. It's very interesting. And it's interesting as well that not that many of you some of you are already involved in online trade shows, but not that many. But many of you are already doing e-commerce. That's fantastic. Now I'm going to jump into some questions. Question number one, Adrian, for you.
Sure.
You said PBExpo will resume. Do you know when?
We don't know when yet. We're still in conversations with the Miami Beach Convention Center, the city of Miami, and some of our main sponsors and partners to make sure that we can host the event and meet the expectations of our audience. We were very excited for PBExpo, and it was very heartbreaking for us to not host the event last week, and unbelievable that it should have been held last week. But we are very much working on setting new dates. It's more than likely going to be in the late fall or winter, but we don't have a set date yet. So be on the lookout for that. We're gonna be putting out news regarding the new dates for PBExpo 2020 in the midterm, hopefully soon. But at the moment, we don't currently have a confirmed date.
Okay, Adrian, just a related question. You said you're going to put out information. Can you say where would someone find the information? How can they track what's happening? Are you sending out e-shots or?
We will be sending out email. That's going to be the main form of news regarding PBExpo. So if you have registered to attend PBExpo, if you are an exhibitor or a sponsor of PBExpo or a speaker at PBExpo, we'll be notifying you via email. And we will also post that on our official social media channels and on pbexpo.org. You will see notices of when the event will be held.
Thanks, Adrian. And there's quite a few questions about the role that PartSpace or PBExpo has in terms of finding new markets and new opportunities. Maybe you could just spend a second on that.
Sure. I believe that we're strategically positioned to help. One of the great things about working at PartSpace is really getting to speak to and engaging with, that famous number, 7,600 member companies. You may ask, well, who are they? And from my perspective, I think I'm very privileged in the fact that I've engaged with a lot of companies in just about every market that we serve. And it's markets as remote as Tahiti, where Air Tahiti Nui is a PartSpace member, and as local as Fort Lauderdale Executive, where we have a huge number of members in our community that are all next door to each other. So it's a very big network of buyers and sellers that we have, and opportunity is arising everywhere. I had a very interesting conversation with an MRO customer in Singapore 2 nights ago, and from that conversation, I learned that a lot of MROs, especially on the commercial side, are looking to liquidate inventory, and that's good news for a lot of people on the buy side, because it means that prices are going to go down for a lot of material, a lot of rotables, a lot of hard to find parts that companies have traditionally held on to. So, what I would suggest is that, if you're a PartSpace member, initiate a dialogue with your account manager. Your account manager is an invaluable resource that you have at your disposal, not just to talk about your bill and the latest developments in terms of software that PartSpace has rolled out, but also in terms of discussing what you can do at this conjuncture to really grow your business, to get your brand out there. Where can you go to get more business? So, have a conversation with your account manager. You can definitely reach out to me by all means, and I'll guide you along as much as I can, and um, uh, uh, you know, uh, help support you. But parts-based account managers are extremely well positioned to engage with you. They understand your business and give you some recommendations as to where you can invest and where you should pivot your strategy in order to really maximize opportunities in this challenging time.
Thanks, Adrian. Some of the attendees joined a little bit late and are asking where they can see a copy of it, of this presentation. Maybe Samantha, you have an answer to that?
Yes, we will be happy to send a copy of the recording on tomorrow, on Friday. You'll receive an email with a link to this webinar recording.
Terrific. Okay, so everybody gets a copy of the recording tomorrow. In the meantime, we have slightly gone over our time, and nobody's dropped out, which is fantastic. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Oh, one last question. Thank you all for attending. I wanted to thank Adrian especially, and Samantha. Great job. Thank you both for presenting innovative solutions for the avionics industry, supply chain, part space, and PBExpo. We'll be
Thank
watching
you
the
so
space to
much,
make sure.
Susanna.
Thank you all. Happy exporting. Stay safe. Happy business, and stay safe, stay well, and see you all online.
Be
Bye-bye.
well. Take care.
Be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.